In 2002, a girl named Elizabeth Smart was kidnapped from upscale neighborhood in Salt Lake City, Utah, and she disappeared, and she was rich and white and pretty, and those are the three things that you need to get all over the news. And so Fox News, ABC, everybody just went nuts for 3 or 4 days, just talking, where's Elizabeth Smart? Oh my God, this girl's disappeared. Meanwhile, there were murders all over Brooklyn, you know, people getting shot all over the place. But this was the national obsession. So obviously from massive national media coverage over one kidnapping, there was a lot of pressure on the Salt Lake City Police Department to make an arrest. So the Elizabeth Smart's sister, very little girl, I think she was 3, maybe 2 even, she was used as a witness. The police questioned her. And she said, she used some, she couldn't even speak. She used, it's Baba or something like that, and some name that she used for the handyman. And the handyman was a guy named Richard Ricci. So the police went and got him, arrested him. His fingerprints were in the house, obviously, because he was a handyman who worked in the house. And they put him in prison where he refused to tell them where she was for obvious reasons. So a woman named Nancy Grace went on national television. She is a lawyer, a former prosecutor, and she suggested that the police begin torturing him. At that point, it just became surreal. Shortly after that, he wound up dead in prison. Shortly after that, Elizabeth Smart was returned alive. So, and everybody realized that it had, well, actually nobody realized it. You know, everybody was focused on Elizabeth Smart. The girl is back. Wait, isn't that great? So ABC, CBS, all 3 more days of wonderful coverage of a woman who'd just been kidnapped and repeatedly raped, and everybody's hanging outside her house, not giving her any privacy. So just a complete media frenzy. And nobody mentioned what Richard Ricci, who had essentially been kidnapped and killed by the Salt Lake City Police Department. And the contrast between what happened to Richard Ricci and the fact that he just went under the rug because he didn't fit the narrative, and what was happening to the Smarts, who were just being hailed as, oh, she's so brave, she put up with this. Yeah, I mean, she was, you know, she's just wants her privacy at this point, I'm sure. And the difference in treatment is what inspired me to write the book. It was pretty appalling, the way he got treated. And he, as I say, didn't fit the narrative. And the narrative is, bad person does something, police bravely come in and solve the crime, and everybody's happy. So the second part, where the police bravely come in and solve the crime, it wasn't in the narrative, so it just went from A to C. You know, you just forgot about B. Well, when you write a novel, you get to pick what facts go in. Which, I mean, I've written for magazines and for newspapers, and you don't get to pick. And so it makes such a difference, you know, because you get to tell a story from beginning to end. You don't have an editor. You don't have somebody saying, well, we don't want to do this. We don't want to start a fight. I remember I wrote working for a very small newspaper. I was writing about an incident that had happened in a parking lot between 2 men, which had resulted in one of the cars being set on fire, which caused a big problem. I was actually writing about a car fire. Well, I talked to both men on the phone. One of them sounded like he was from North Philadelphia, black. And so I was wondering if this was race related, because the other guy was white. And so I mentioned that in the article, and my editor said, no, you can't mention that. So the most salient fact of the entire article is thrown out. So yeah, that's typical of journalism and how the entire thing works. But if I was writing a novel about it, I would put that in there, obviously. You know, I get asked this question a lot, where are you from? Which is a very basic question, and I have difficulty with it. It's a 5-minute answer, you know. I'd love to be able to say where I was from particularly, or identify more strongly with one place than another. I last paid taxes in France. I live in China. I talk with an American accent, and I have a British passport. So I don't know where I'm. It's so yeah. I kind of exist in that world of I guess novels. I'm identified more as a writer than anything else. So I published the first two novels in the U.S. The third novel, which was Un canaille de mi, it was eventually published in English, but I tried to get it published and they wanted the ending changed because they felt it was too depressing. The French loved it and published it right away. And I noticed that, just that difference. This was almost 10 years ago, and I became aware that dealing with the French was just so much easier. There was so much less stress. Dealing with the Americans is more money, but it's just an attitude. My last novel, Arrêtez-moi. I was talking. I finished it. I sent it to the French. They said they loved it. They published it. And I was trying to find a U.S. agent. I reserved the rights for English language, and I was trying to find a U.S. agent. And I was talking to an American agent on the phone, and he said, "What's it about?" And I said, "It's about a man who gets arrested for a crime he didn't commit." Okay, yeah, well, we've had enough of those. Thanks anyway. And at that point, he just tried. That was it. That's the conversation, and that's all you're going to get from those people. It's like you have 10 seconds to do your pitch. They don't want to. They're not interested in the fact that you've published 5 novels already. They just don't. They're looking for a quick buck. If I had said it's about a boy wizard who does, boy wizard, okay, Harry, or a vampire, then vampires are big now. So yeah, that's the attitude you're dealing with, and it's just like I can't deal with it. I just don't want to. I don't want to put up with that. So I just started dealing with the French almost exclusively.
Mediapart.
The basic idea of the novel is it's 2 soldiers in Vietnam. Just a very small bit at the beginning. It's interaction between 2 soldiers in Vietnam, and most of the novel takes place in the present day. It's during a political campaign for the U.S. Senate. And one of the candidates, is one of the soldiers from Vietnam. So I thought I could just write about Vietnam, basically from what I had read. I love military history. I've read a lot about Vietnam. So I thought maybe I could do that. So I wrote it, and it was flat somehow. It was historically accurate, but it was just not what I wanted. So living in China was very useful because I live fairly close to Vietnam, and I also go camping pretty much every month. So I went camping in the Central Highlands outside Pleiku in Vietnam, and just got tons more material, more original stuff. I was able to write about Vietnam a lot more fluently because I had actually been there. So, yeah. And in the novel, the Senate candidate refers to something that happened in Vietnam, and then he is called a liar by other people who were in his unit. And because of this, it just brings back all these Vietnam memories, and suddenly a lot of the talk is about Vietnam and what a disaster it was politically. Also, there's some political relevance to the Iraq situation, what happened there, how we don't really learn lessons, even though we like to say we do. Yeah, even with Iraq, there were a lot of Americans coming forward saying, because of Iraq, it's so similar. For one thing, the media during most of the Iraq crisis was saying, you can't compare this to Vietnam. It's exactly the same thing. And there were a lot of people. John McCain, actually, he was a presidential candidate. He came forward and he said, we could have won Vietnam if we just kept going. And that seems to be the right-wing viewpoint in the United States, just complete divorce from reality. And so that mentality was transferred over to the Iraq War. We could win Iraq if we just keep going. It's like they're not really. What do you even mean by win? There didn't seem to be a goal. So we were already there. We'd occupied the country. All the military can really do is take real estate. That's what they're built for. And so we lived in the entire country. So what now? We weren't winning.
Mediapart.
I think he was elected, he has changed absolutely nothing. And I think that in order to become a political candidate, you have to assure everybody who backs political candidates that you will change nothing. That's part of your job. The entire thing is just a complete facade of democracy. There is no real electoral process. The people's voice, I mean, you can pick Obama or you can pick Romney. It doesn't really matter. Romney's a Obama's going to win easily. It doesn't, but it's just a dog and pony show put on for entertainment. It's nothing to do. The real power is never jeopardized by allowing people to vote and change something. Like everything is corporate controlled. So Obama's just an empty suit. He's not doing anything. He's completely useless. He's a showman. In America, when they talk about the decline of the USA, they do it in two ways. They're long way off in the future. It's like global warming. That's just a long way off in the future. You know, these things are happening right now, right in front of us. And they're also in denial. They say it's not happening. They point to one statistic that says that America is growing and just ignore the 300 that say that it's collapsing fast. And I mean, most of the people who do this are media and politicians, and they're obviously have an agenda of trying to forestall any activism, which is going to, you know, try to slow the process down. So, yeah, my books are all about the decline of the U.S., and I'm not hopeful for the U.S. You know, when Rome was declining, everybody was always saying, oh, well, people have been saying Rome's going to decline for hundreds of years. It's never going to happen. And then one day, it happened. So this is our day. It's really happening. You know, America's not going to come back because none of the things that happened that have caused the decline so far have been addressed. The entire economy nearly completely collapsed in 2008. It was that close. And no banking regulations have been changed. Nothing. Nobody has the political will to do anything. That's actually a way I think China has a better grasp of reality because they don't have a democracy. They don't have this. They can make a law and enact it within 24 hours. In America, anything gets tied up in paperwork. You know, Senate filibusters. Nothing gets done. So no, I think the country's going downhill and it's going to continue and it's going to get much worse soon. They just do these tricks all the time. And you wind up reading ads and you think you're reading a news article. You know, newspapers now, websites, any form of media is going to present to you, I have an example, is going to present to you a definite corporate agenda viewpoint presented as the view of the masses. And people have become so brainwashed by it that it's impossible to have a functioning democracy anymore. And the example I was going to say is that public relations departments actually all have a Rolodex of something called third-party assets. And these are writers and pundits who generally pose as being libertarian, and journalists too, who pose as being libertarians. They're fighting for constitutional rights. But they have expressed a willingness to hire themselves out. There are a lot of them. I believe Penn and Teller are third-party assets. Malcolm Gladwell, he's a journalist for The New Yorker. They've expressed a willingness to hire themselves out to underhandedly promote certain industries. And Penn and Teller are magicians. They're very popular and they're known for being libertarians. And they had a television program in which they were exposing things. They exposed UFOs, you know, the UFO hoaxes. They expose conspiracy theories. And they're very good. And they use this as credibility to run another episode. One of the other episodes was about fast food, how it really doesn't hurt you or damage you. And they had an interview with the CEO of a major fast food franchise talking about how everyone's been brainwashed to think fast food doesn't hurt you. I mean, our obsession with fast food is causing massive global warming damage, environmental damage. It's causing massive obesity epidemic. So you can, once you've gained credibility for saying a certain number of sensible things, you can rent yourself out as a third-party asset and then squeak in an obvious argument. Because, am I going on too long?
Yeah, no, no,
Okay. Well, what's happened is that everybody's so partisan now that if you present yourself as a Republican, the Democrats are immediately going to shut off as soon as they see Republican on your little chyron. If you present yourself as a Democrat, the Republicans will go, oh, you're a socialist. But if you present yourself as a libertarian, it's much sought after because people will listen to you. So libertarian third-party assets are a great example of how public relations have just completely subverted the democratic process.
Mediapart.
It's not so much a big picture of the U.S., it's a big picture of how economies affect people. You know, I was born very poor, and by the time I graduated high school, I lived in one of the richest areas in the world. And very few people have that opportunity. Most people, if there is an adjustment of wealth in their childhood, it's in the other direction. They go from rich to poor, as my mother did, actually. And I think that if you spend a certain part of your childhood with poor children and then another part of your childhood with rich children, that you just develop a completely observant attitude of their behaviors, because their behaviors are very different. The contrast between life and life as a rich person and life as a poor person in Scotland, it's not just material goods. It's not just that you don't have a car and then you have a Porsche. You know, it's not, well, I never had a Porsche, but most of the people I went to high school did. And it's not just your couch and your TV and everything is so nice when you're rich. There's also an attitude, because when you're poor, when you're growing up in these poor neighborhoods, you get told that you get an idea of what is expected of you, and what is expected of you is not much. It's like you're given a lot of religion. You're told God will, God accepts you, God this, God that. And by the time you start going to a really rich high school, you start hearing the world. You're the leader of tomorrow. You're gonna control the government. These are the people. This small section. I went to one of the richest high schools in the country, and we were told, we were the people who were going to make policy in the future. We were the power center. So we were told to dream big. Nothing was beyond us. And it's a very different message than I was getting when I was working with the kids of out-of-work coal miners in Scotland. And the correctional system, the jails and the police departments, the whole law enforcement industry has managed to present itself through through massive media blitz of these television programs like CSI, Law and Order, where everybody is extremely competent and just absolutely knows what they're doing. And the lawyers are wonderful. Law and Order, they just come in. They all know case law from 1950, and they can whap it off the top of their heads. And that's not really what an actual courtroom looks like. It's a bunch of people who barely graduated City College who are sitting there going like this with papers, trying to find some plea agreement that they lost. And so people just get plead out. They are forced to plead to things they didn't do just so they don't get 20-year sentences for it, So, the legal system has incredibly positive media image, but the reality is that it just imprisons people and throws people away all over the place, and we've just turned a blind eye to it. The suffering that it causes is immense, and nobody's going to do anything about it. It's not like anybody has the political will. I had a friend who was arrested when he was in high school, but he told me a story where they put him in, he was 15, so you're not legally allowed to question someone who's 15. But the laws, and he was actually dealing marijuana out of the high school. But legally, the police had to wait until somebody came up. But they pressured him and pressured him and pressured him. He was arrested with 9 other kids. It was a giant drug bust in the North Carolina high school. He was the only one who knew enough, because his father was a corporate lawyer, who knew enough not to say anything. The other 8 kids all started talking. You're not allowed to do that. It's in the state law, you know. Police break the law all the time, and when I say break the law, I don't mean minor things. Like, the Constitution just doesn't seem to matter to law enforcement, and that has specifically gotten much worse. So, especially with the Patriot Act and terrorism fears and all that. So, yeah, people get abused all the time, and what we see, what we're blasted with, is these very righteous police officers doing the good thing, always trying to catch a very bad person. In actual fact, you know, they're trying to catch someone who's committed, at worst, a very minor transgression, and they're doing brutal things to do it. All you have to do to be acquitted of a crime, really, is either have a great lawyer who can find some technicality to get you off, or stock the jury with people that you know. Juries are not corporate lawyers. You know, they don't understand concepts like you're innocent until you're proven guilty. If the jury is unsure, it doesn't benefit them to release you. I mean, it's obvious math to me. I mean, if the jury does not want a murderer in their community. So if you might be a murderer, if policemen have said this guy's a murderer, well, you know, you probably are. It's the lawyer's job to prove that you're not. So the way a jury thinks, juries are scared of murderers and rapists. They'd rather put them in prison. So right there, you're starting with 2 strikes.